Welcome to the Star Sailors League and the Qualcomm 2013 Star World Championship hosted in the US sailing mecca, San Diego. 10 Star World Champions are among the few sailing stars that compete here. In the one scheduled race for today, the fleet was spread along the starting line, with the breeze building from the west, offering some great conditions for the 66 teams. Gould and Seek from the USA were the first on leeward, with their compatriots Anosov and Caesar a few meters windward from them. However, the majority of the top teams chose to start closer to the windward side. USA's Ledbetter and Morton were the first to head for the right side of the course, having on top of them Dorgan Brothers from USA and Fleckenstein and Mulder from Canada. At the weather mark, Reynolds and Haenel were in the lead, with Campbell and von Schwartz right behind them. The Brazilians, Grael and Concalves, were in fourth place, just behind Brun and Tejar from the USA. On the downwind leg, the fleet jibed soon after the offset mark and headed for the right side that was also favoured during the first upwind. Doyle and Pascalato had some fierce battles in the middle of the downwind, keeping lower from the rest of the fleet, closer to the left side. Their choice did not prove to be beneficial, and even though they sailed fast, they both lost some precious meters. While Brun and Tejar were struggling to maintain their third place, Campbell rounded on top at the bottom gate, with Grael now in second. Positions 3rd through 10th had a close rounding, meaning that it would be a challenging upwind for the teams, and the tactical game was now on, a typical characteristic of star-class races. In the middle of the upwind, Grael was still second, securing his position by always keeping himself between the mark and his opponents. So at the windward mark, Campbell rounded first, with the Brazilian breathing down his neck. McCausland and Trinta from USA managed to move up to third in front of Brun and Tejar. A few meters behind, the French Rohat and Pulfo were battling it out with USA's Ledbetter and Morton. During the second downwind, the pressure had increased and was now averaging 12 knots, offering some great conditions for the teams. The top two boats, Grael and Campbell, had split from each other, with the Brazilians sailing lower, and the pressure from Grael forced Campbell to break Rule 42, dropping him into second place. The roles were now changed, with the American now chasing Grael. Grael and Concalves managed to extend their lead even further during this last upwind and scored a bullet. What a great start at the opening race of this World Championship. Both of them seemed satisfied with their performance. In second place, it was McCausland and Trinta that chose the right side during the upwind and overtook Campbell and von Schwartz, that finally finished in third. Let's hear some words from the winner of this race.
We have started in the middle of the starting line, and as soon as we had the chance to cross the fleet, we were lucky to do it. So we were in a good position, but people from the corner on the light of the right came a bit better. We rounded the mark on fourth place, managed to finish downwind on second. Then we were in a good fight with Andrew Campbell, but it's a pity he was penalized, and we got the lead. Last upwind we protected the right all the time, so we decided not to cover himself, just to do our best, and it was good enough.
Let's look at the results. Welcome to the second day of the Qualcomm Star Worlds for 2013, where things are starting to get exciting. The foggy weather delayed the start of the day's racing, but finally within less than an hour, everything was ready to go. At the start line, the majority of the teams chose to keep together on windward, a repeat of the choices made yesterday by most of the competitors. The teams were then aiming to head to the more favourable right side of the course. The Ukrainian team, Grayev and Kusnier, were among the first of the boats to head to the right, with the Germans Merkelbach and Bartel to leeward of them. At the windward mark, it was the duo of Ledbetter and Morton who rounded first, followed closely by the Swiss team Chantony and Ducomum, who followed them in second, with the Germans tight on their tail in third. The wind was stronger today, and as the fog started to clear, the breeze began to build, making for some ideal conditions for the 66 competitors sailing here in San Diego. Conditions aside, the boats being sailed at the Qualcomm Star Worlds are guaranteed to provide some close racing action, being the world's premier one-design racing keel boat. Having led the race thus far, it was Ledbetter and Morton who approached the bottom mark in the lead, seeming confident as they rounded the right side first, with the right-hand side being favoured once again. It seemed that Ledbetter had his tactics worked out as he made a habit of keeping closer to the left as he approached the windward mark, gaining precious metres over his opponents as he stayed close to the left ley line. Chantony must have had some strong tactics in play as he also managed to maintain his current position in second place. The Americans Diaz and Baltins were now in third, having managed to overtake the Germans. Before the last upwind, Diaz made his move, rounding the opposite mark at the bottom gate, keeping an eye on the Swiss team as the Americans chased them for second place. However, he was unable to get ahead and instead tacked over the Germans Merkelbach and Bartel, unable to benefit from the left side. Currently in 13th place on the overall leaderboard at the time of racing, Diaz could benefit greatly from a win in this race, adding a little pressure to their campaign today. Ledbetter and Morton sailed without distractions throughout the race, extending their lead even further and as a result scoring the day's bullet. A win in this race rocketed the team from 9th to 2nd place in a spectacular leap up the leaderboard. But let's hear more about today's race from the winner.
The day started foggy, and so the race committee waited because we couldn't see the weather mark. But when we finally got started, it was a nice hiking breeze, and we got off the line clear and went to the right. The trickiest part of the race was after we rounded the first mark first, and the fog closed in. You couldn't see the leeward mark, so it was, you didn't know where we were headed. But we held them off there, and then we stayed ahead on the way to the finish.
It's the third day of the Qualcomm Star Worlds 2013 in San Diego, and the question on everyone's lips is who is going to take this year's trophy. The answer remains to be seen. The light conditions delayed the proceedings today, but finally the 66-strong fleet had a clear start, with the USA sailing legend Reynolds and his crew Haynel starting well in the middle of the line. But their choice of side was questionable as they struggled to reach the right side quick enough, where the wind pressure was strongest, benefiting the teams that had opted for that side to begin with. In the end, it was a different US team that capitalized on the wind pressure, with USA's Donald and Elterman taking the lead and rounding the windward mark first. The wind was very inconsistent today, making tactical decisions hard and the skippers anxious. There were many ups and downs throughout the race, with the rankings changing hands repeatedly, each puff of wind making all the difference. At the leeward gate, it was yesterday's winners Ledbetter and Morton who rounded in third place. They made a bold move and opted for the opposite mark from the rest of the fleet as they took the left side. McCausland and Rohan kept to the right side of the course, aiming for the statistical advantage of the last 2 days that proved the right to be paying. However, today it was more about finding the erratic wind gusts than getting to the correct side, and as soon as the boats tacked, it was Ledbetter who was ahead, coming from the left-hand side. He rounded on top with a safe lead from Rohan, who was now in second, trying to repeat his performance from yesterday. To score 2 bullets at the Star World's Championship would be an exceptional achievement and one that all skippers would be aiming for. Top sailors like Reynolds and Grail did not manage to perform as well as yesterday thanks to today's tricky weather and found themselves at the back of the fleet. As the boats came to the last downwind leg, it was Ledbetter that tried to repeat his strategy from the previous upwind and headed again for the left side. Rojas stuck to his choice and went with the opposite mark at the gate. It was a choice that paid off as former world champion Rojas with his crew Pulfer crossed the finish line on top, scoring today's bullet. But let's hear from Rojas himself.
Yeah, it was a very exciting race on the third day of the World Championship here in the Star class. The final decision was on the last downwind, which side of the course will be favored. And they chose to go offshore, and we decided again to play the right. And we succeed to have a pretty good wind and nice angles at the end.
With the championship halfway through, it's now Ledbetter at the top of the overall rankings. Many teams are close in points, and without a discard yet, it remains to be seen who's going to take the top spot on the last day. The top teams are fully focused on winning this championship and claiming the prestigious cup. So stay tuned to see who's going to be going home with it.
And we'll be back in San Diego for more sailing action after the break. And still to come, it's kite racing from China, after which we go extreme sailing in Brazil. See you in a couple of minutes.